A Captain and a Madman by RazielZonoran. Interlude 1. Wait here, the doctor murmured, tongue flicking across suddenly dry lips as he gave a nervous little chuckle, patting Picard on the back. Do not get too close to it, under any circumstances. I know your people have discovered it before, but you'd be as well off standing in a puddle of petrol as you might be getting too close to it. Understand? When the captain of the Enterprise nodded, albeit a bit reluctantly, the doctor gave a brief, approving smile. With a deep, shuddering breath, the Time Lord seemed to draw upon some inner reserve of nerve, a confident swagger settling into his stance as he sauntered up to the Guardian, trying his very best to look directly at it without flinching. There you are, the doctor drawled. Do you know who I am? Yes, the Guardian replied, its voice unconcerned, uncaring. Time Lord. Doctor. But displaced. A stranger to this place. Smart as a whip, you are, the doctor replied, but a lot of his bravado seemed subdued. You know why I'm here, then? Yes. The Time Lord seeks the key. The knowing. The window. You did it once, for my people, along from now, but a long time ago, the doctor replied. You probably did it for the Time Lords of this reality as well. I have done it for all Time Lords, in all realities. Wonderful. Loads of practice, then. Can you do it for me, now? Give me the key. The displaced doctor should not pursue this course. The displaced doctor may return to his own reality through the arch. The arch shimmered, and just like that, images began to flit across it, faster and faster. Cardiff, a Dalek saucer, UNIT, the interior of Torchwood, countless places, people and events from his own universe forming such a tantalizing lure. Despite himself, the doctor actually edged another step closer, but something, some deep, protesting cry deep in his heart stopped him in place, glancing over his shoulder to consider his big blue box. In my TARDIS. The doctor's eyes narrowed, just a little as he turned back to the Guardian. Can I bring her through as well? The TARDIS is incompatible with the arch. It cannot pass through. Despite his unease, the doctor's lips twisted in scorn. No deal. The displaced doctor should reconsider. Why? His breathing was growing a bit ragged, as if the fight-or-flight instinct were pulling at him. Why do you want me to leave this reality? A kindness to a fellow being of time. The Guardian seemed almost to hesitate before continuing. If the displaced doctor does not depart, the displaced doctor will seek answers all his own. The displaced doctor will find those answers. The displaced doctor will wish he had not. Answers. Answers to what? The doctor's jaw clenched. To the differences in this reality. Can you tell me what happened here to make history progress so differently? There was a long pause as the arch hummed, seeming almost to process the request. When it finally spoke again, its tone seemed almost regretful. Such revelation is beyond the scope of my gaze, came the sonorous reply. I display that which is. I display not that which has been. What? The doctor blinked, glancing at Picard before turning his attention back to the Guardian. Of course you do, you've displayed the past before, according to the stories you won't shut up about it, so. I display that which is. I display not that which has. Right, the doctor lifted his hands. Whatever, you say. Whatever that means. How about the key, at least? Can you give my TARDIS what it needs to function properly? The key is always present. The arch will display. The TARDIS will learn. The displaced doctor will leave. More unhappy too, the Time Lord muttered, turning away and starting to move back towards the TARDIS. His entire body was tense as if expecting he was going to be shot from behind. Well, started, then. The grinding of the time rotor mingled with the low hum of the Guardian's arch as the two structures engages in some mysterious communication. Images did seem to flash in the arch once more, but these were far more rapid than any human, Time Lord, or even android eyes could have kept track as, with dizzying speed, the Guardian imparted information on, well, everything. Seated on a rock about halfway between the two temporal entities, Picard and the doctor had both been silent for some time. Picard because he was absolutely fascinated by the flickering images, his attention fully focused on it as if hoping he might catch a glimpse of, well, anything. The Time Lord, on the other hand, didn't seem to be looking at anything at all, his head bowed, eyes unfocused, every line on his face suggesting grim discomfort. Eventually, the captain noticed that, a bit of concern crossing his face. "Are you all right?" Picard finally asked, startling the Time Lord from his near trance. "No." The reply was unusually sharp, the doctor's head shaking just once in emphatic denial. "I would rather do almost anything than come here, than face that thing. My people are not enamored with it. There are stories, legends, about this structure, though no Time Lord has dared approach it in countless eons. And believe me, when a race of fearful legend has its own fearful legend, well, it's something to be paid heed to. In the later years, it became forbidden even to tell such stories of this structure, to speak of it aloud. The name we gave it was stricken from all histories, removed from our own timeline, buried." The Guardian's hum grew slightly louder, and the Time Lord reflexively jumped and glanced at it, only to wince and turn his head away again, looking almost ill. "You keep averting your eyes," Picard noted softly. "Is there a particular reason for that?" "Well, it's just uncomfortable for me to look at," he explained tersely, "uncomfortable for any species with a strong sense of linear time's passage to look at. It's a fixed point, you see, not just in time, but in everything. It has always existed, the same object, unchanging, as well as this world it sits on. It has existed even in times where no other planets have existed, no other speck of matter. It exists in all dimensions, not as counterparts like you or I, but as the same object, the same gate. In theory, if one were to find a way to destroy it, and I couldn't even begin to guess how, then it would cease to exist in every reality, every moment in time, and the changes to the timestream would be catastrophic. The Time Lords discovered it quite by accident, drawn to the temporal distortions it emits. They were young, the ability to travel through time only a recent development, raw and rough through crude TARDISes, facilitated by exposure to the untempered schism. They could only travel a few hundred years in either direction, and still relied on conventional space travel to explore the universe beyond our known borders. We were the first, you know, the first to master time, or so we thought. Imagine the blow to their overweening pride when they encountered this structure, on a world older than any they had ever seen, older than the sun it orbited. The structure was a mystery they could not resist, and they were determined to learn its origins. They built a mighty city around it, confident they would learn its secrets. A TARDIS was enhanced by it, made into a vessel capable of traveling to virtually any point in time or space, and with it, they intended to find those who had constructed this monument to time itself. They traveled back 1,000 years, it was still there. They traveled back 10,000 years. It was still there. 100,000, 1,000,000, 1,000,000,000. With each jump, there were fewer species, fewer solar systems, fewer galaxies. Until they finally came to a great void, in the very beginning of all creation, this void, this time, where they were truly alone in all the universe. And it was still there. Still old. That must have been quite a shock to them, Picard noted, rather understating it. It terrified them, the doctor confirmed grimly. To find something they had no mastery over, no knowledge of, they fled from this world. Abandoned the city. Retreated from this structure en masse, running from it as fast as they could. They returned to Gallifrey, my home world, and vowed never to speak of it again. After all, they had taken what we needed from it. That would explain the ancient city that is said to surround the structure, Picard replied pensively. But why are we here? What are you seeking to gain from it? Giving the Guardian another brief glance, the doctor pointedly turned away from it, facing the captain squarely as he once more held up his hands to make entirely useless gestures to accompany his words. Like your transporter, coordinates are needed to travel through time and space, if you want to have any control over where you're going. Knowledge of where planets are, at each moment in time. Lack of such knowledge is what restricted the Time Lord of the early days. The doctor gestured vaguely to the thrumming Guardian. That is how that structure enhanced the first true TARDIS. Imbued her with incalculable knowledge, how every planet moved, every civilization developed, a knowledge that the first TARDIS then passed down to every subsequent generation, mine included. With that knowledge, a TARDIS could go anywhere, to any moment in time, without fear that it would materialize in the middle of a sun, or next to a black hole. With that knowledge, a TARDIS became like the Guardian itself, an object beyond time and space. But, like the power systems, that knowledge applies to your universe alone, Picard replied slowly, nodding as he began to more or less understand what the doctor was saying. And so you've come here to update your navigation, as it were, but how is it you knew the coordinates to arrive here? As I said, the doctor replied grimly, this Guardian is a fixed point, it exists in the same coordinates at every moment. Quite literally, it is the only location that remains constant throughout the multiverse. You see why it's so bloody unnerving. Truly the immovable object, all roads lead to it. In any case, once the Guardian has uploaded its knowledge to the TARDIS database, she'll be able to get around like normal. And how long would that take? Picard asked. I can't be sure, the doctor replied. Could be days. Could be weeks. The cloister bell sounded. Could be now. Leaping to his feet, the doctor ushered the captain back into the TARDIS and slammed the doors shut gratefully, letting out a long sigh of relief now that the Guardian was out of sight. Scurrying over to the console, he quickly called information onto the monitor. Ah, perfect. Everything I need, down to the coordinates of your ships at every moment from it was built to when it's anyway, time to bring you back home, Captain. The drama from my disappearance should settle down after a week, so we'll swing by, drop you off, and be gone again before even Data can say a word. Are you sure that's wise? Picard asked, and when the doctor cast him a surprised glance, the captain cleared his throat. This universe is unfamiliar to you. Perhaps I could still be of help. I'm quite touched, Captain, the doctor replied, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. But you've already done enough for now, you need to tend to your crew in the coming months. There are going to be more than a few challenges in your path, besides, where I'm going to be going, well, let's just say this is going to be tricky enough without tossing in another unstable temporal element like you into the mix. I'll be back, though, not to worry. Where is it you intend to go? Picard asked, his brow furrowing. Well, for one thing, I need more information on trans-dimensional travel, the doctor mused, sighing as he considered the readout. It's one of the few things the Time Lords didn't muddle about too much in, which has left a decided lack of information. However, fortunately, there do seem some first-hand incidents I can look into. At least some of the answers would seem to lie aboard the USS Enterprise. Picard frowned a little, head tilting. Aboard the Enterprise. I cannot recall an incident that would prove of much use to trans-dimensional travel. Dear Captain, the doctor replied, a hint of a smile crooking the corner of his lips as he began to mark in a new set of coordinates. I never said your Enterprise. Chapter 8, The Mirrored Past. First Officer's Log, Supplemental. The Enterprise continues to remain in orbit above the Hakan homeworld, attempting to negotiate for the rights to harvest their dilithium reserves. From what the captain has divulged, the Hakans are extremely hesitant to risk parting with it, not for reasons of greed or avarice, but rather for fear of what could be done with the destructive power that their dilithium could provide. Though I believe the captain finds their intransigent nature frustrating, he also admires the basis for their stand. Indeed, such a civilization would be welcome within the Federation for their principles. Matters have been further complicated by the arrival of a passing ion storm. At current altitude, the Enterprise is being subjected to considerable turbulence and ionized interference. Although the risk is negligible, there have been reports of minor damage and system failures throughout the ship. The importance of securing this trade agreement, however, currently overrides such considerations. Report, Mr. Sulu. Spock instructed quietly, hands folded behind his back as he stood next to the helm console, considering the swirling magnetic storm on the viewscreen. We are maintaining orbit with some difficulty, Sulu reported quietly, his eyes narrowing as he considered the readouts. But the storm is intensifying, sir. Very well. When the captain checks in, we will inform him as to. Spock's musings were interrupted as the comm system sparked to life. Kirk to Enterprise. Spock here, Captain. Report on magnetic storm, Mr. Spock. Standard ion type, Captain, but quite violent. A rough shudder shook the bridge leading to a wry, and unpredictable. Quote. Rough ride. If we remain, Spock replied, which was as close to a recommendation as he would get. Stand by to beam up landing party. Plot an extended orbit to clear disturbance. Kirk out. Comply, Mr. Sulu. Aye, sir, Sulu replied, carefully inputting the new heading. I will be in the transporter room, Spock announced calmly, even as he moved towards the turbolift, stumbling only once when the ship gave another sharp tremble. "Ensign Kara, if you would please send a transmission to Starfleet updating them as to our status, and the necessary delay." "Yes, Commander," the communications technician, replacing Uhura for the moment given she was on the planet's surface, shifted her hand to her earpiece as she began to speak quietly, composing the necessary message. Only moments after Spock had left, the turbolift doors slid open again. Chekhov and Sulu were having a muffled conversation with each other, and so didn't look up. Kara did, and blinked with mild surprise when an unfamiliar fellow stepped out, dressed in a crisp, red Starfleet uniform, right down to the boots. His brown hair was nonetheless a little non-regulation, messier than it should have been. A repair kit was clenched in the man's right hand, the other behind his back quite casually, and he glanced about the bridge, looking both pleased and slightly nervous. Though there were over 400 crew members aboard the Enterprise, and as a result it wasn't as if she were close, personal friends with every single one, but still, this one looked completely unfamiliar. "Hello," Kara finally said, her tone friendly, if a little confused. "Who are you?" "Oh, sorry, where are my manners?" the man replied, friendly smile in place as he approached Kara, extending a hand, even as Sulu and Chekhov glanced over their shoulders, surprised. "John Smith. I transferred aboard during our layover at Starbase 5. New engineer, very excited to be here, the Enterprise, plum assignment, very plum." "All right," Sulu replied slowly, "but what are you doing on the bridge?" "I was told to come up here," Smith replied, frowning a little as he hefted his repair kit, his other hand concealed behind it. When the ship shuddered again under the ion storm's effects, nobody heard the faint buzz that sounded from behind it. "Nobody told you I was coming. Something about the science station being down and not working, right?" Frowning, Chekhov vacated his station for just a moment, moving over to the science station. He gripped the railing tightly as another sharp tremble buffeted the ship, then peered into the station's scope. The others watched him, Smith a bit anxiously, the other two just curious, and when Chekhov finally straightened, the engineer drew in a deep breath. Very little response from sensors, Chekhov finally announced. "He's right. There is a repair order in the computer," Kara noted, brow arched. "Though nobody's signed it. That could be an oversight." "All right," Sulu finally said, gesturing to the station, eyes still doubting a little. "Help yourself, Mr. Smith." "Much obliged." Smith edged over to the station, setting the repair kit down and popping open an access panel under the console. "Should be a simple enough matter, all considered, just fiddle around with." The rest turned into mumbling as the man tinkered with the inner workings of the console, falling quiet. The rest of the bridge crew stopped paying him much heed soon enough, turning back to their own tasks, and so nobody really noticed when Smith glanced back over his shoulder nervously. Upon seeing that they were otherwise occupied, the red-shirt engineer climbed to his feet and peered into the science scope, adjusting a series of controls on its surface. The moments stretched into minutes, until finally the communicator on the helm console gave a sharp breep. "Spock to bridge," the Vulcan first officer's voice piped through. "The landing party is aboard. Adjust orbit." "Aye, sir," Sulu replied. "Adjusting orbit now. Spock out." Well, the entire bridge crew jumped a little at Smith's loud proclamation, staring at him as he straightened from the science station and backing towards the turbolift slowly, smile firmly in place. "All fixed here. I'll just be going back to engineering to do various engineering things. Everyone's doing a spot-on job, just really great, so just carry on. People." The turbolift doors finally, mercifully, closed before the man could babble anymore. Chekhov and Sulu exchanged glances, and finally Sulu turned in his chair to glance back at the communication station. "Kara, are you sure there was a repair order up here?" Sulu asked, brow lifted. "I could have sworn he was acting shifty." Kara sighed and shrugged. "I checked it, and the crew roster for good measure, everything checked out in both." Chekhov chuckled a little. "We always get the crazy ones from Starbase 5. Dash 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 dash." Once the turbolift doors had closed, Smith gave a long, low sigh of relief, slumping back against the wall just a little as he tugged irritably at his collar. It was a long moment before he remembered that these turbolifts needed manual control, Grabbing the small handle on the back wall, he called up a mental image of the ship's layout, deciding on his next location. It wasn't until the turbolift was on the move that he began to laugh a little, a sort of nervous giggle. "I can't believe that worked," he murmured, giggling a bit more before drawing in a deep breath. It was going well so far. He'd dropped Picard off, in his own ready room, no less, and made his next stop the 23rd century. The Enterprise of this time period didn't have the means to detect the TARDIS arrival, thankfully, which meant no alarms had been triggered when it had materialized deep inside one of the cargo bays. On the older Constitution-class starships, with no replicators on hand and synthesizers providing relatively limited functionality, much of the foodstuffs, materials and spare parts had to be kept in storage, which meant the individual bays were actually many times larger than those aboard the Galaxy-class variety, and poorly lit to boot. So he had tucked it deep in the back of the cavernous room, concealed behind stacks of ration crates. He would have set it on invisible running, but he expected to be there for longer than the power reserves could hold up. The energy modulator wasn't a perfect replacement, and so he was mostly relying on luck. Lots of luck. More specifically, he needed more information on exactly what had happened. Not the events, because he knew those already. The Enterprise landing party, due to mysterious circumstances, ended up switching places, as it were, with their counterparts in an alternate reality due to a transporter accident, with obvious hijinks ensuing. The problem was, for some insane reason, the Enterprise hadn't thought to take measurements during even the second transport. The amount of scientific data on just what had happened to cause this dimensional shift was negligible, and if he hadn't been trying to maintain his cover, he might well have scolded the entire crew for being so careless. So records wouldn't suffice. The Doctor had needed to board their ship, access their bridge and use their instruments for himself. The TARDIS had a variety of scanners of its own, all of which would be compiling plenty of data, but he didn't want to risk missing anything that the Enterprise's scanners might pick up. It had been risky, incredibly so, even though he had taken the basic precaution to break into their computer banks and insert some useful files. Their computer was even easier to manipulate than 1701D's had been, but he knew there was a chance they'd have refused to believe him. Or would have doubted it enough to check with a superior officer. Still, he hadn't been caught, which was wonderful, except he wasn't done, not by a long shot. Even though he had programmed the sensors to record the return trip when they unloaded the mirror counterparts, he still wanted to gather a few more pieces of data. It would be tricky, incredibly so, and there was always a small chance someone would stumble on his TARDIS, but, well, where was the fun of playing things safe? According to the report he'd read from the Enterprise D's computer, the mirror universe counterparts, like the party from the original universe's Enterprise, had tried to blend in with their new surroundings. Of course, given these particular people were considerably more ruthless and craven than those who normally occupied this reality, they weren't going to get away with it for long. But the Doctor wasn't interested in how things would turn out, he just wanted his chance to get close to those doppelgangers. Grunting, he stripped off the red tunic, revealing a blue one beneath it. Quickly adjusting it here and there, he crumpled up the red one and, once the doors opened, started to step out. But when he saw that Spock and the imposter landing party were coming his way, he panicked just a little. With nowhere to stash the extra uniform, the Doctor settled for dropping on the floor in the turbolift, then stepping out with quick, confident steps, marching right past Spock and the landing party. Fortunately, the Vulcan seemed distracted by what he believed to be the real Kirk, who at the moment was acting a little erratic. The Hawkins have refused to cooperate, Kirk was all but bellowing, even as he shrugged off a scowling McCoy's attempts to speak with a raised hand. "We can't let that stand, Spock." "Captain, with all due respect," Spock replied, "the Hawkins are well within their rights to refuse a pact." "Well, yes, Mr. Spock, we'll just let them keep it all to themselves." The Kirk replied, spreading his hands out as he snorted, sarcasm dripping from every word. "It's not as if Starfleet has ordered us to secure it, they just wanted us to suggest it, to nudge them gently and panhandle for their generosity. Unless you forget, Commander, I am still in charge of this ship." Kirk stopped, then, turning to face the Vulcan, "Unless you're thinking you'd like to try and change things. That what this is about?" "Captain, I thought you were loyal, Mr. Spock." Kirk snarled, closing what little distance remained between them until he was eye to eye with his first officer. Neither had noticed that the blue-shirted crewman who'd walked past was moving more slowly with each moment to remain in earshot. But I guess it was only a matter of time before you started looking at my post. Is this why my protection isn't here? Captain, Spock replied quietly, not flinching or backing away, lifting a single brow archly. This is highly illogical. You are acting more irrationally than usual. Kirk froze at that, his eyes flickering back and forth in thought, and then he backed off, arms crossing over his chest. Right, of course. Clearing his throat, the mirror Kirk glanced away. I must be tired. Very hard day. My apologies, Mr. Spock. Perhaps you, and the landing party, should consider resting. The ion storm will last another few hours, minimum. Kirk straightened, not entirely able to keep the sneer from his face as he muttered. I think I will. We'll give the Hawkins an hour to decide. For their sake, I hope they agree. As you will, Captain. As Kirk and the remainder of the Mirror Universe imposters vanished down a side corridor, Spock continued straight down the hallway, head bowed and clearly thinking hard. The Doctor, for his part, picked up speed again. He had a very specific destination in mind and, as fun as watching all this drama develop firsthand was, he was going to have to get a move on if he wanted to get to sickbay in time. After all, information on the actual distortions that caused the shift in realities was only half the battle. An examination of the effect it had on the counterparts could also be very useful and, like before, the more measuring tools he had, the better. The blue tunic would, hopefully, let him seize a medical tricorder, and some other useful equipment, without drawing too much notice. It was just a shame the real McCoy was currently stranded in a parallel universe. From the files on him, the Doctor would have found that meeting interesting, to say the very least. Unfortunately, the Doctor was so busy congratulating himself for his brilliant plan, he failed to realize that Spock had entered the same turbolift he'd just vacated. Report, Mr. Sulu, Spock instructed as he stepped from the turbolift, sounding almost distracted. We have moved to a higher orbit, sir, Sulu replied. We are no longer being affected by the ion storm. When Spock didn't reply, the helmsman glanced over his shoulder. The Vulcan still stood near the turbolift, holding a rumpled mass of red cloth in his hands. Is everything all right, sir? Sulu asked slowly. There was a uniform top in the turbolift, Spock replied, the closest thing he had to a frown as he shifted to stand by the science console, fingering the fabric of the uniform as if thinking it would hold some secret. Unusual. The remainder of the bridge crew glanced at one another, a sense of mild dread starting to spread as his words sunk in. Another moment passed when they silently exchanged arguments as to just who was going to be the one to confess. When Sulu and Chekhov turned back towards the viewscreen, the decision was made, and the communications officer was forced to step in. Sir, there was a crewman up here earlier, sir, Kara said quietly, frowning as she tried to avoid looking away from the Vulcan science officer. An engineer. It was unusual, but he had a repair order to restore function to the science station. The science station was undamaged, Ensign, Spock pointed out, a single brow lifting. Not when I checked it, sir, Chekhov protested, getting involved now that the ice was broken. It wouldn't function. Considering that, the first officer keyed a few commands into the science terminal, and bent down to peer into the scope, face intent. The others watched him for a long moment as he made minute adjustments, scanning through the ship's computer until he found what he was looking for. There is indeed a file for him in the crew roster, Spock finally said, straightening as his hands folded behind his back. Despite the apparent evidence supporting the man's existence, he still seemed unconvinced, and it was only after a brief hesitation that he moved to the nearest companel, keying it to life. Spock to engine room. Engine room, Assistant Chief Kale here, sir. Mr. Kale, is there a John Smith listed amongst your staff? There was a brief pause before Kale replied, a bit surprised. No, sir, I don't believe we have anyone by that name aboard. Why? Spock's brow furrowed. A man dressed in an engineer's uniform was on the bridge earlier for a repair order that was filed without my knowledge. Furthermore, his file is in the crew roster, Mr. Kale. Are you certain you have no engineer by that name? Well, Kale replied, I know our staff pretty well, sir, and that name doesn't feel familiar at all. Fascinating, Spock mused. Thank you, Mr. Kale. Spock out. Arms folding behind his back, his head tilted as he mulled over it for a long moment, fully aware that the rest of the bridge staff were waiting for his order. Normally, I would call the captain for his decision, but the behavior of the landing party has been erratic since their return. I cannot be certain if these two incidents are coincidental, but in the event they are not. Ensign Kara, if you will please put out a security alert for a man matching this Smith's description, quietly, please. If he is aboard, it is best not to alert him as to our suspicions. Sir, Sulu said slowly, do you think this Smith could be a threat to the Enterprise? I am uncertain, Spock replied, then added firmly. Rest assured, Mr. Sulu. We will find out.